She tossed black trash bags at my feet like I was clutter. Amber, my daughter-in-law, smirked and said, "These should fit your stuff." By noon, the buyer's agent was inside measuring her dream nursery. By Friday, her Pinterest pantry was listed under fixtures to vacate. They thought I was just the widow in the guest room. Turns out, I was the owner. They never bothered to read the paperwork. Oh, wait, before we go any further, I got to ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Saturday morning, suburban Denver. The sound of crinkling plastic was louder than expected. Maggie Sloan stood at the edge of the living room, still in her house slippers, watching Amber pull a roll of black trash bags from under the kitchen sink like she was handing out party favors. "These should fit your stuff," Amber said, tossing the first bag onto the hardwood floor with a careless flick. It landed near Maggie's feet with a dull slap. "We figured you probably don't have much." Ryan stood near the fridge pretending to read something on his phone. He didn't say anything, didn't look up. His silence was a betrayal all its own. Maggie didn't bend down, she didn't touch the plastic. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and studied the way the sunlight hit the tile, how it cast clean, sharp lines across the floor she'd scrubbed 100 times. She focused on that, not the acid blooming quietly behind her ribs. Amber was already moving on, chatting over her shoulder like nothing had happened. "If you need help taping them, I think there's duct tape in the junk drawer. Just don't take forever. The movers are booked for noon." There it was, not a request, not a conversation, an eviction wrapped in bubble wrap and indifference. Maggie inhaled slowly through her nose, counting the beat like her old yoga teacher taught her. 1, 2, 3. Stop, hold it, exhale. The rage didn't cool, but it compacted tighter, denser, hotter. That was better. Contained fire burned longer. She turned without a word and walked past them, past the trash bag, past the table with the fake eucalyptus centerpiece Amber insisted on keeping out year-round, up the stairs that still creaked on the third one from the top. In her bedroom, Maggie closed the door softly behind her. Not a slam, not a message, just finality. She crossed to her dresser, oak, decades old, still carrying the faint scent of sandalwood and tide. She opened the top drawer, passed the handkerchiefs and folded scarves, and reached underneath. There it was, the business card sat tucked beneath a faded photo of her husband, Bill, smiling with his arms slung casually over her shoulder, the lake behind them glinting like a promise. She left the photo untouched and pulled the card free. Joanna Feldman, broker advocate, buyout specialist, office Greenwood and Chase Realty, direct 303-555-0146. The edges were crisp. Maggie had only held it once, the day Joanna handed it to her with a calm, knowing smile. "Just in case you ever want to stop asking for space in your own house." Maggie sat on the edge of the bed and turned the card over once, then again. Her thumb pressed against the raised lettering. Below her, she could hear Amber talking again, something about boxes, something about being on schedule. Maggie stood, slipped the card into her pocket, smoothed her blouse in the mirror. She didn't look defeated, she looked precise. At 10:17 a.m., she picked up her phone and dialed Joanna's number from memory. The line rang twice before connecting. "Joanna Feldman," the voice answered. "It's Maggie Sloan," she said. "Activate the sale." A beat of silence, then Joanna replied, voice low and steady, "Understood. I'll send the contract confirmation to your email and alert the buyer." Maggie hung up. Downstairs, the front door opened, probably one of Amber's friends coming to help. Laughter followed, casual and sharp, like nothing upstairs mattered. Maggie walked to her closet, opened it slowly, and reached for her suitcase, the real one, not the plastic kind. 3 weeks earlier, Greenwood and Chase Realty, Denver. The office smelled of eucalyptus and printer toner. Maggie sat across from Joanna Feldman, her fingers resting lightly on the leather portfolio laid out in front of her. The blinds were half drawn, letting in just enough sun to catch the glint of the pen resting on the contract's signature line. "Once this is signed," Joanna said, tapping the corner of the page, "we begin everything quietly. Your name stays on title until closing." The buyer's fully vetted, liquid cash, clean background, and flexible with timelines. Maggie nodded, her face unreadable. "No one else needs to be notified." Joanna gave a professional smile, sharp but not cold. "You're the majority owner. You don't need consensus. You just need will." Maggie looked down at the page again. The presale agreement felt weightless in her hands, nothing like the years it represented. She reached into her handbag and pulled out her glasses. "I never signed over my portion," she said, half to herself. "Bill left me 51%. I never corrected the assumption." Joanna's brow lifted slightly. They never asked. They never cared to. She signed, not with hesitation, not with ceremony, just ink to paper, decision to consequence. Joanna flipped the packet closed. "I'll have the legal prep underway by morning. You'll receive a draft of the official sale terms by next Friday. We move at your pace." Maggie stood, adjusted her coat. "I'd prefer we move at theirs. They just don't know it yet." Present day upstairs bathroom, same house. Amber sat cross-legged on the closed toilet lid, scrolling furiously on her phone while chewing on a thumbnail. Her search bar read, "Joanna Feldman, Greenwood Chase Realty." A second later, a professional profile popped up, Joanna's headshot, a controlled smile, blonde bob, no-nonsense navy blazer hovered above a bold title, "Full Buyout Specialist, Discreet Residential Exit Solutions." Amber's jaw tightened. "Babe," she called out, voice echoing slightly off the tile, "what did your mom say Joanna's last name was?" No answer from downstairs. "Tears." She clicked the LinkedIn link. Joanna's client testimonials filled the page, handled our family transition without drama. Protective, thorough, confidential. One quote read like a punch, "She made sure I could leave before anyone else could stop me." Amber stood abruptly, nearly knocking her phone into the sink. She stepped into the hallway and yelled louder, "Ryan, can you come up here?" No response. Instead, she heard the faint creak of Maggie's door closing downstairs. Measured, final. Amber moved quickly to the top of the stairs, but her husband was gone from view, probably in the garage, probably pretending this wasn't happening. She turned back to her phone, clicked on Joanna's About tab, scanned the paragraph twice, then a third time, and that's when her stomach sank. Because if Maggie had gone through Joanna, that meant contracts had already been drafted, buyers already briefed, legal momentum already in motion, and they hadn't seen any of it coming. Meanwhile, in Maggie's bedroom, Maggie folded a scarf into her suitcase with the care of someone packing memories, not just items. She placed a slim leather file beneath her blouses, the pre-agreement, proof of sale, title, property tax receipts, every detail notarized, duplicated, and backed up. There would be no disputes, no delays. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. Amber calling. She let it ring out, then she slipped the phone into airplane mode, zipped the suitcase halfway, and sat at the edge of the bed once more. Below, she heard a door slam, footsteps scrambling, a panicked voice calling Ryan's name with increasing speed. Maggie closed her eyes and breathed deep. Later that day, in suburban Denver, Maggie heard the knock before it landed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, just two soft taps on her bedroom door, cowardly, uncertain, Ryan's version of confrontation. She didn't move right away, let the silence stretch, then calmly she stood and opened the door. He stood in the hallway, hands shoved in his hoodie pockets, eyes darting behind her like he expected someone else to do the talking. Amber wasn't with him. "Hey," he said. "Can we talk for a sec?" Maggie stepped aside. "We're already doing that." He stepped in, looked around like he hadn't been in her room in months, which of course he hadn't. Amber said, "You're, selling." "I am," Maggie replied, walking over to her desk. She opened the top drawer and pulled out a leather folio. Would you like to see the documents, or do you prefer guessing? Ryan gave a nervous chuckle. Come on, Mom, you wouldn't actually go through with this. This is just heat of the moment stuff, right? She handed him the folder inside, the deed showing her name as 51% owner, the pre-agreement with her signature, property tax receipts for the last 6 years, all paid from her account, utility bills in her name, everything dated, notarized, airtight. Ryan skimmed one page, then another. His face paled. Amber's voice came shrieking up the stairs. You're doing this to us after everything. Maggie didn't raise her voice. She didn't move toward the door. She just spoke with clean precision. Everything, Amber, be specific. Do you mean the time you told your friends I was lingering out of guilt, or the time you left me off the holiday card because I wasn't photogenic? Amber's footsteps stormed up. She appeared in the doorway, cheeks red, phone still clutched in one hand. This is insane. You're sabotaging your own family. No, Maggie said, turning to her. I'm protecting what's mine. I paid the mortgage after Bill passed. I paid the taxes. I paid every utility bill while you both played house and treated me like the living ghost. Amber scoffed. You're seriously throwing us out because of some bruised ego? You've confused silence for weakness, Maggie said. That was your first mistake. Ryan set the folder on the dresser, his hands looking unsure of what to do. So what, you want us to beg? We'll get a lawyer. Maggie said evenly, I'll forward them everything. It'll save them time on discovery. Amber crossed her arms. You think you're so noble? You're just bitter and old, and I'm just done. Maggie interrupted, sharp now, not angry. Final. Amber blinked, startled by the cut of it. Ryan tried one last angle. If this is about the trash bags thing, that was a joke, you know? Amber doesn't filter. This has nothing to do with the trash bags, Maggie said. That was just the ribbon on the box you've been packing me into for years. She walked over to the folder and flipped to a yellow tabbed page, sale conditions. You have 14 days to make a counteroffer in cash, full buyout, no financing, no delays. Ryan blinked. We don't have that kind of money. Maggie nodded. Then start packing. Amber's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ryan stood like he'd just been dismissed from a courtroom because in a way, he had. Maggie turned away from them and opened her closet. We're not done, Amber snapped. You were never really part of the conversation, Maggie said calmly. Just part of the cleanup. Sunday morning, suburban Denver. Maggie poured boiling water over loose-leaf Assam, the way she had every morning since Bill's diagnosis. 2 sugars, no milk. The cup warmed her palms, but the heat in her chest was her own. The kitchen was unusually quiet. Amber hadn't launched into her usual morning symphony of clanging pans and 2 loud FaceTimes. Ryan hadn't wandered in, yawning fake innocence. The silence was tactical. Good. It gave Maggie time. She sat at the breakfast nook with her planner open and her phone beside it. A yellow legal pad sat at her elbow, lines filled with itemized notes, her prep list, her exit map. First call, Denver Gas and Heating. Second, Aurora Water Management. Third, City Waste and Disposal Services. Fourth, Allcom Internet and Cable. Each rep confirmed her identity easily. She was the account holder after all. I'd like to terminate all services effective in 31 days, she said calmly. New owners will handle transfers. Each call ended with a confirmation number, and Maggie wrote them all down in clean black pen, no wiggle room, no questions left unanswered. By 10:13 a.m., she opened her email draft, attached the formal 30-day notice to vacate, and CC'd both Ryan and Amber. The subject line was simple: Notice of termination of residency effective immediately. Attached were 2 PDFs, the signed buyer agreement and the schedule for utilities ending service. She hit send at 10:15. The stairs creaked as Amber padded into the kitchen in fuzzy slippers and last night's mascara. Her tone was buttered and practiced. Good morning, I made eggs. Thought you might want some. Maggie didn't look up. She stirred her tea and let the silence stretch. Amber hesitated. I've been thinking. I know I've been sharp, but that's just stress talking, you know. Still no reply. I mean, we all lost Bill. This house, it's a lot of memories. I get that. And maybe I was too pushy about moving forward, but it's just 'cause I care. Maggie finally looked at her, but not with malice, just tired clarity. You care now. Amber's smile faltered. I've always cared. Maggie sipped her tea. That's not what the trash bag said. The comment landed like a slap. Amber blinked, then forced a chuckle. Okay, you're mad. I deserve that. But can we not go nuclear, please? Before Maggie could reply, Ryan stepped in from the garage, still in yesterday's jeans. His voice was low, casual, almost apologetic. Mom, can we talk? She nodded toward the living room. They sat, him on the couch, her in the chair Bill once favored. The distance between them felt wider than the carpet. We got your email, he said. I figured. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Look, I know we've been tense, but this doesn't have to go like this. We can figure something out. Maggie tilted her head slightly. Like what? I don't know. Maybe we put your name on the remodel loan or start a co-ownership plan, something with equity sharing. I'm not interested in patching drywall on a sinking ship. He blinked. She leaned back, calm, quiet, absolute. You have 14 days to make a full cash offer for the property. Otherwise, the contract proceeds as signed. Ryan rubbed his jaw. You're serious? Deadly. Amber walked in, arms folded. You'll throw us out like we're tenants. You are tenants, Maggie said. You just never read the fine print. Amber's face twisted. So that's it? You're choosing a stranger over your own family. No, Maggie replied. I'm choosing peace over performance. There was no shouting, no storming out, just the slow, heavy drip of realization settling over them. Ryan's voice dropped. You planned this. Maggie stood, collecting her cup. That's the difference between you and me. I don't mistake comfort for control. Tuesday, 10:30 a.m., Magnolia's Bistro, Greenwood Village. Maggie spotted Amber's attempt at reconciliation the moment she walked in. 2 mimosas already poured, a window table reserved with fresh tulips, Amber seated in a pastel sweater she only wore for public pity, Ryan beside her. Stiff in a new button-down, eyes already half apologizing. The hostess gestured politely. Maggie nodded and walked herself over. Amber stood. You came. I wasn't sure you would. Maggie sat. You weren't sure about a lot of things. Amber smiled tight. We just thought it'd be good to clear the air, start fresh brunch. Maggie said softly, scanning the laminated menu, the most public meal for the most private betrayals. Amber blinked. Ryan cleared his throat. A young waitress arrived, all freckles and optimism. Any coffee for the table? Black for me, Maggie said, folding her hands. No cream, no illusions. Amber ordered a second mimosa. Ryan asked for water. The small talk dribbled forward. Amber complimented Maggie's necklace. Ryan asked if she'd watch the Broncos game. They smiled too much, said too little, like actors pushing through a script no one rehearsed. 10 minutes in, Ryan raised his glass, half-hearted, limp at the wrist. To family, he said, voice barely above brunch jazz, and maybe starting over. Maggie didn't raise her cup. She looked at him with the calm of someone who'd sat through depositions nastier than any brunch could ever be. Amber leaned in, palms open. Look, we've made mistakes, all of us. I know I've said things that hurt you, but this family, it's still worth something, right? Maggie took a slow sip of coffee. Define worth. Amber smiled like it was a joke. We're trying, okay? We're here. Isn't that what matters? You're here now, Maggie said, but not when it mattered. Not when I was coughing blood in the laundry room. Not when I spent 3 nights on the recliner because the guest room was too much of your style. Not when you handed me trash bags and said they'd fit my life. Amber's smile fractured. Ryan tried to jump in. I'm not family, Maggie said, voice razor thin and resolute. You made that clear. I'm an obligation, a placeholder, a retired woman who got too healthy to bury quietly. Amber's eyes welled, but not with remorse, just discomfort. Maggie reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp manila envelope. She laid it on the center of the table like a dealer laying down a trump card. Amber stared. What is that? The signed offer, Maggie said. Joanna filed it with the buyer yesterday. Title transfer is in motion, closing date pending inspection. Your deadline to counter is still holding at 11 days. Ryan's mouth opened, closed. You brought that to brunch? No, Maggie said, standing. I brought it to a farce. The waitress returned with a tray of croissants, pausing mid-step as the tension curdled the air. Maggie placed a $20 on the table for her untouched coffee and turned. Amber called after her, This isn't you. You're being spiteful, cruel. Maggie looked over her shoulder. No, I'm being meticulous. Ryan stood halfway. We can still talk, you had years to talk, she said. You used them to build a story where I didn't count. Amber's voice cracked. We can fix this. You don't fix broken trust, Maggie said, already walking away. You replace it with boundaries. Thursday morning, suburban Denver. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m. Maggie didn't move to answer it. She was already on the back porch, sitting in Bill's old teakwood chair. With a cup of chamomile balanced on her knee, a soft breeze rustled the edge of her robe. The scent of wet earth and lilac drifted from the neighbor's hedge. Inside, the front door creaked open. Ryan's voice was muted, uncertain. Hey, can I help you? A second voice answered, steady and businesslike. Grant Milligan, here for the scheduled walkthrough. Maggie didn't have to see him to remember the file Joanna had forwarded. Civil engineer, real estate investor, Denver native, calm eyes, clean shoes. Amber's voice followed next, sharp and shrill. No one told me you'd be inside the house today. I was told this was the access window. Grant said calmly, the seller confirmed it. Paperwork's in hand. A pause, shuffling, the sound of paper rustling against fingertips. You can look around the garage, but the rest of the house is still lived in, Amber added, blocking the entryway. It's not really presentable. Maybe you can come back later. Maggie sipped her tea and closed her eyes for just a moment. The breeze shifted. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler started hissing. Joanna's voice rang next, firm and professional. Amber, you're interfering with a legal inspection. Footsteps entered the foyer. Joanna continued, per the signed agreement, Grant has full access to all rooms. If there's an issue, we can document the resistance and delay the close, but your 30-day notice still stands. I wasn't resisting, Amber said too fast. I just thought we'd agreed on a heads-up. Maggie smiled faintly. There had been no such agreement. Inside, Grant's voice was patient but unmoved. I'll start in the kitchen. Footsteps moved deeper into the house. Amber's sandals slapped down the hall behind him. Wait, you're not opening cabinets, are you? Joanna again. He's entitled to a full walkthrough. This isn't a courtesy, it's contractual. The front door closed with a soft thud. Maggie opened her eyes again. Through the dining room window, she caught a glimpse of Grant in a blue button-down, clipboard in hand, inspecting the kitchen sink pipes while Amber hovered behind him, arms crossed like a petulant crossing guard. Ryan stood near the fridge, watching like a spectator at a trial he didn't understand. Grant turned down the hallway. Amber jumped in front of the door. That's our room. Joanna, stepping in behind her, held up the contract like a badge. No, Amber, that's part of the property, and you don't own it. Grant didn't raise his voice. He simply pointed to the page Joanna held. This gives me full access. Amber turned to Ryan, panic breaking through the facade. Make her stop this. Ryan looked at Maggie, still sitting calmly, still sipping her tea, watching the clouds reflect in her cup. Do something. Amber hissed at him. Tell her this is insane. But Ryan said nothing. His shoulders slumped as the truth finally settled in. He wasn't in charge of anything anymore. Friday morning, suburban Denver, Maggie opened Facebook only once a week, usually to check her niece's baby photos or RSVP maybe to community potlucks she had no intention of attending. But this morning, the notifications were waiting like a warning flare. 10 new tags for comments on a post mentioned in one shared story from Amber Sutton Hughes. She clicked. Amber had posted a filtered selfie at a coffee shop with a vague emotional caption. When the people you've cared for the most suddenly treat you like strangers, it stings, especially when it's family. But I guess aging makes people bitter. Boundaries matter to protect your peace. Elder gaslighting. The comment section was already bubbling with sympathy, sending hugs, girl. You don't deserve that. So sorry you're dealing with this. Stay strong, mama. Maggie scrolled once, then again. Another post followed, a screenshot of Joanna's business card with the caption, "When your ML secretly hires someone to force you out of your home." Wonder how long this was planned. No tags, but no need. The implications were surgical. Maggie sighed and reached for her tea. Then slowly, she opened the Notes app on her phone. Folder documentation, subfolder public manipulation. Screenshot saved. Next post, screenshot saved. A comment from a distant cousin in Wisconsin, screenshot saved. She sent all of it to herself with a time-stamped subject line, social media defamation archive backup number 1. Just after noon, her phone buzzed again. Ryan, the text preview read, "Can we please talk? It's getting messy and people are asking questions." She didn't reply. An hour later, her email pinged. Subject: disappointed from Aunt Claire. The message was short, clipped. Heard what's going on. I don't understand how you could do this to your son. We raised you better than this. Call me. Maggie didn't call. Instead, she opened a pre-prepared folder titled Property Records. Attached was the notarized deed showing 51% ownership. She added a PDF of the will, included redacted screenshots of Amber's trash bag comment thread from 6 months ago. She blind CC'd 23 relatives. The subject line was as clean as it was damning, "For your records, context and truth." By evening, 3 responses had come in. One was an apology from a cousin in Oregon. "Didn't realize everything was in your name. That changes a lot. Hope you're okay." Another from a second cousin's wife. "Honestly, this makes sense now. They never contributed but always acted entitled." But the one that landed deepest came from her niece, Hannah. "They've used you long enough, Aunt Mags. Let them swim without the lifeboat." Maggie sat back in her chair and let that settle. Later that night, Joanna called. Her tone was less formal than usual but direct. "They've started posting about the house," she said. "A few photos of the property. Nothing technically illegal, but it's visibility I don't like." Maggie nodded slowly. "Damage control." Joanna exhaled. "No need. The buyer's solid, but I'm flagging this because sometimes when people get this frantic, they turn stupid." Maggie turned to look at the hallway. "Quiet now, but for how long? You think they'll try to sabotage the inspection?" "I think Amber's the type to accidentally leave a faucet running or misplacing a circuit panel," Joanna replied. "Just keep your eyes on everything and let me know if anything smells off, figuratively or otherwise. I've already installed motion-activated cameras at the entry points." Maggie said, "Let them try." Joanna chuckled softly. "You're 5 moves ahead, as always." 3 would have been enough, Maggie replied, "but I've lived with them." Saturday afternoon, Aurora Community Center. The folding chairs were arranged in a soft circle, too symmetrical to be casual. Someone had brought lemon bars, someone else had printed name tags. The smell of institutional coffee hovered in the air like a warning. Maggie arrived 10 minutes early. She took the seat closest to the window, back straight, purse zipped, a navy binder resting across her lap. She greeted no one. She didn't need to. She wasn't here for performance. Across the room, Aunt Claire flitted about like the de facto coordinator, adjusting chairs and smoothing tension. Ryan stood near the snacks, pretending to read the ingredients on a granola bar. Amber sat with red-rimmed eyes and a strategically soft cardigan, shoulders curled inward like a misunderstood teenager. A Kleenex box rested on the chair beside her, already half empty. "Thank you all for coming," Claire began, voice trembling with artificial warmth. "We just wanted to open a space for healing for Grace." Amber jumped in like she'd been waiting to catch the mic. "I didn't ask for this," she said, already blinking tears into place. "But I'm grateful because I feel like I've been painted as this monster, and I'm not." Maggie remained still. "I know I'm not perfect," Amber continued, voice wobbling, "but I loved that house. I loved this family, and when I said hurtful things, I was just overwhelmed. People lash out when they're scared." She paused, eyes darting toward Ryan. He gave a single nod, like a trained assistant cueing the next act. "I made mistakes," Amber whispered, folding the tissue in her lap, "but I never thought it would go this far." Silence lingered. That's when Maggie opened the binder. She stood, walked to the center of the circle, and placed a stack of identical navy folders on the table beside the lemon bars. "One for each of you," she said. "Please read before forming conclusions." Cousin Jay opened his first. Aunt Claire hesitated, then followed. A hush fell across the room as pages turned. Inside were full timelines, bank statements, utility records, title documents, and a neatly tabbed summary labeled "Unpaid Contributions." Cousin Ray read aloud without looking up, $73,400 in unpaid property taxes, gas, electric, and structural repairs, all covered solely by Margaret Sloan. A low exhale came from someone near the back. Another page, "No documented rental payments since 2019. Water usage spiked 340% in 2021. Grocery contributions marked as optional." A silence thicker than guilt pressed the room still. Then Ryan's sister Danielle, who hadn't spoken since arriving, looked up. Her voice cut like clean metal. "You guys freeloaded for years." Ryan stiffened. "That's not fair." "No," Danielle said louder. "Now what's not fair is watching Mom pay for everything while you two played entitled victims. What's not fair is listening to Amber scream at her for using too many burners while she was boiling cabbage to stretch the groceries." Amber's face drained. "I never," she started. "You did," Maggie said evenly, "and it's all documented. I didn't come here for a hug. I came so no one could say they didn't know." Aunt Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, blinking hard. Amber stood suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "This isn't justice. It's revenge dressed up in paperwork." "You know something about dressing up," Danielle snapped. Amber let out a strangled sound somewhere between a sob and a curse and grabbed her purse. "Come on, Ryan," she hissed. "We're leaving." But Ryan didn't move. He looked at the binder in his lap, then at his mother, who was already turning away, already retrieving her purse like nothing more needed saying. Amber stormed out the door. It didn't slam, it clicked like something final being locked. Maggie didn't watch her go. She only turned to Joanna, who had quietly arrived in the back row and said nothing the whole time. Joanna offered a single nod, and then Maggie spoke, not to the room, but to no one in particular. "I kept the lights on. That was my mistake." Monday afternoon, suburban Denver. The first box Amber packed was a decoy. It held one throw pillow, an empty perfume bottle, and a single high heel with a broken strap. She left it dead center in the hallway, half-taped and fully in the way. By noon, the house looked less like a home being packed and more like a battlefield of cardboard and resentment. Amber moved loudly. Cupboards opened with force, drawers scraped, doors swung too wide, then slammed just short of breaking. It wasn't packing, it was protest choreography. In the guest bathroom, she poured out half-used bottles of shampoo into the sink and left the caps scattered on the tile. In the kitchen, she emptied the spice rack into a mixing bowl and shoved it in the fridge. Maggie said nothing. She had already hired immaculate exit cleaning services for next Friday, full deep clean, certified move-out documentation included, paid in full. By 3 o'clock, Amber's muttering became louder than the boxes themselves. This house was supposed to be ours, she snapped to no one. We had plans, paint colors, renovation quotes. She kicked an empty box down the hallway, where it collapsed like an exclamation point. In the living room, Maggie sat at the dining table reviewing a checklist printed in 12-point Cambria. She marked off another item, keys accounted for garage, front, side gate. Her pen moved quietly, undisturbed. Just before 4, the doorbell rang. Amber, covered in sweat and passive aggression, groaned and waved a limp hand from the hallway. "Not it." Maggie stood and opened the door. Grant Milligan stood there again, this time in jeans and a slate-gray jacket, a metal measuring tape looped at his belt. He gave a courteous nod. "Mind if I take updates?" "Ed Measurements buyer needs final numbers for furniture planning, of course," Maggie said, stepping aside. "They're lucky to have you." Amber popped out from behind the staircase. "We're still packing." Grant didn't flinch. "I'll be out of the way." He walked in with quiet authority, clipboard tucked under one arm. Amber followed him room to room, arms crossed, offering unnecessary commentary. "I always thought this room would be a nursery," she said in the spare bedroom, "but I guess some people don't care about legacy." Grant measured the wall silently. Maggie stayed in the kitchen, flipping through a manila folder of inspection receipts. From the corner of her eye, she watched Grant measure the doorway to the master bedroom, jot something down, then walk past the fireplace. Amber trailed him again. "You know," she said louder now, "this used to be our dream home." Maggie didn't look up. "Then you should have treated it like one." Amber stopped mid-step for a moment. The room held nothing but the sound of Grant's tape recoiling. He glanced up once, caught Amber's glare, then looked to Maggie. "I'll have final numbers to Joanna by tomorrow. Thanks for the access." Maggie nodded. "And thank you for your patience." He smiled, brief and genuine. "You've made this very easy." As he left, he passed Amber without a word. She made no attempt to follow him. The door clicked closed. Maggie walked to the fridge and circled the date on the calendar, closing 7 days. Amber returned to the hallway, dragging another half-filled box behind her. Ryan still hadn't packed a thing. Wednesday, 11:58 p.m., suburban Denver. The knock wasn't subtle, it came hard and fast. For sharp bangs on her bedroom door were followed by Ryan's voice, louder than it had been in weeks. "Mom, open the damn door." Maggie blinked awake. Her bedside clock glowed red, 11:58. She sat up slowly, eyes adjusting to the dark. The banging resumed. "You don't get to do this without talking to me." She didn't answer. She reached instead for the folder beside the lamp, incident log, prepared statements, and flipped to the marked page. Then she dialed the non-emergency police number. "Yes," she said, calm but clear. "It's Margaret Sloan. I have a family member attempting entry at night. He's emotionally volatile and has been served a 30-day notice to vacate." The dispatcher didn't ask many questions. Her address was already flagged for civil transition. A unit would swing by in 20 minutes. When the patrol car pulled up, its headlights swept briefly across Maggie's rose bushes, still blooming in spite of the season. Ryan was on the front porch, pacing, still barefoot, still shouting. The officers stepped out quietly. One spoke to Ryan, the other walked over to Maggie, now waiting in a housecoat on the porch. "You're okay?" the younger one asked. "Yes," he didn't enter, just made himself heard. The officer nodded. "We'll log the visit. If he does it again, we can file an incident report with a no-contact clause. Just say the word." Maggie nodded. "This is me saying it." By morning, her lawyer had updated the lease documents, stripping all temporary resident privileges and adding a digital lock. Transition date. Amber and Ryan's names were now formally removed from every clause of tenant rights. Joanna confirmed receipt. Clean separation, no contest. Later that afternoon, Maggie sat in the sunroom with a cup of tea, Misha, and the blue folder of final sale prep. She'd already reviewed every page 3 times, but habits once protective die meticulously. A knock came, this one gentle. It was Grant again, this time with no clipboard, just a sealed envelope in one hand. "I know it's a little forward," he said, "but I own a small complex on Spear Boulevard. River-facing units, newer build. 1-bedroom corner apartment just opened up." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "I'm not offering charity," Grant added quickly, "just gratitude for how clean you've made this process." She smiled, setting her tea aside. "I already bought something better." Grant's mouth quirked. "Should have figured. You're the kind that already has her umbrella open before the storm starts." "Storm's over," she said. "This is just runoff." He handed over the envelope anyway. "My card's inside, just in case." After he left, Maggie opened it. The brochure was sleek, with clean typography and muted earth tones. Quiet places for people who liked quiet things. She admired the presentation and set it aside. That evening, the inspector returned to complete his final walkthrough. Maggie followed him from room to room, clipboard in hand. "Minor scuffs on the baseboards," he muttered, running his finger along the hallway. "Looks like someone dragged a box." In the guest room, he noted 2 broken blinds and a missing drawer knob. "All documented," he said. "Deductions will be minor, but they'll come out of the seller's payout." Maggie nodded once. "Understood." As the inspector packed up, he paused. "Most folks, they get sentimental. You don't seem the type." "I am," she said. "Just not about rot." He didn't press further. Monday, 9:42 a.m., Greenwood and Chase Realty. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon oil and ink. Maggie sat at the end of the polished table, reading, glasses perched low on her nose. The paperwork was stacked in neat towers, signed here, initial here, notarized there, a legal ballet. Maggie moved through it with the grace of someone who'd filed motions more complex than this in her sleep. Joanna sat across from her, crisp in charcoal gray, tapping the capped end of a pen against a folder labeled Closing, Sloane Estate. "You sure you don't want them present?" Joanna asked gently. "They've already been too present," Maggie replied. "Let the ink speak for us now?" Joanna nodded once, then slid the final signature page across the table. Maggie took the pen, her hand steady. 1 signature, 1 date, 1 line through 25 years of sacrifice. She set the pen down. Joanna flipped the folder closed, then opened her laptop. "Wire transfers being finalized now. You should see it hit by the end of the day, probably within the hour." Maggie nodded and reached for her tea. A thermos, unscrewing the lid with patient rhythm. "It's not the money, I know it's the silence that follows it." Joanna smiled softly. "You earned both." Ding. Joanna glanced at the monitor. "There it is, cleared. Check your phone." Maggie pulled out her phone and opened the banking app. 6 figures glowed against the screen. Clean, verified, complete. Her thumb hovered over it for a moment. No flutter, no adrenaline, just a deep exhale. She hadn't known she was holding. Joanna turned the monitor toward her. "I've updated the digital title. Ryan and Amber's names are not listed nor eligible for reinstatement. You are the sole executive, retroactive, and irrevocable." Maggie smiled like it should have been when she stepped outside. 20 minutes later, the air hit different. The sun was direct, no filter of blinds or blindsided loyalty. Cars hissed by, somewhere a dog barked. But the silence inside her head was what startled her most. It wasn't the kind of silence that followed slamming doors, it was the kind that follows closure. She walked across the small lot to her car, a soft breeze teasing the hem of her coat. Her phone buzzed. Joanna again, already efficient. Subject: donation confirmed. Attachments: wire confirmations, Rocky Mountain Hospice Fund, Will Finch Women's Scholarship. Maggie opened the PDFs and read them line by line. 50,000 to hospice, 25 to the scholarship fund she'd always admired, but never had the freedom to support. No fanfare, just release. 8:15 p.m. Maggie's kitchen. Last supper alone. The kitchen was quiet now, properly quiet. No footsteps overhead, no tantrums disguised as tears, no one slamming the fridge as if cold air could punish. Maggie stood over the stovetop, flipping a thin salmon fillet with practiced ease. One lemon wedge, a pinch of dill. Her late husband would have approved. She plated it with roasted asparagus and 2 boiled potatoes, poured 1 glass of dry Riesling, and set it all down at the kitchen table she'd scrubbed 100 times but never eaten at in peace. She picked up the fork, took 1 bite. It was perfect. She didn't turn on the TV, she didn't scroll her phone. She just chewed slowly, deliberately, then set her fork down and let herself smile. Not a smirk, not a weapon, a real one. The kind that sat in the cheeks without needing to prove anything. Thursday, 7:52 a.m. suburban Denver. The moving truck arrived 2 hours early. Maggie didn't complain. She met the 2-man crew, Miguel and Brent, in the driveway with a clipboard, gloves already on, sleeves rolled up. Her voice was calm, her instructions clear. Everything with yellow tape stays. Everything else is trash or donation. Document it all. They nodded, unfazed. They'd seen worse. Inside, Amber's wreckage sat where she'd left it, like a tantrum fossilized in cardboard. 3 mismatched dining chairs, a box of tangled cords, a broken curling iron tucked beside a half-used bottle of self-tanner. No notes, no labels, just residue. Brent raised an eyebrow at a pile of opened shoe boxes. You want photos? Maggie handed him her phone. Geotag every room, timestamp the lot, email them to the address on the clipboard. She didn't hover, she trusted the process. By noon, the last box had been hauled out. The floor, once cluttered with protest packing, now shone under the slanted light of an open window. Maggie walked the perimeter of each room like she was breathing the house in for the first time. Every room echoed. No voices, no crying behind doors, no whispers that sounded like war, just clean, empty space. 1:15 p.m. front lawn. The couple across the street, newish early 40s, were out trimming their hedges when Maggie stepped outside to water the hydrangeas. The woman smiled politely and called out, "Hey there, we've been meaning to say hello." Maggie waved, hose in hand. Took me a while to reclaim the front porch. The man chuckled. You the one who owned that place the whole time? I am. The woman leaned closer. We always wondered about that couple, your kids. Maggie didn't answer right away. The man chimed in, half apologetic. They yelled a lot, slammed doors. Sometimes we thought they were squatters. Maggie laughed, really laughed, not bitter, not polite. A full-bodied sound that surprised even her. She put a hand on her chest like she had to catch it. The couple smiled, then excused themselves. Maggie waved them off and turned back to the hydrangeas, still grinning. Squatters? She might frame that. 6:45 p.m. kitchen. The house was quieter than it had ever been, the kind of quiet you didn't just hear. You felt it under your skin, like clean linen or the last note of a symphony. Maggie stood in the kitchen and struck a match. She lit a lavender candle and placed it in the center of the island, where Amber once insisted on keeping a decorative bowl filled with fake lemons. The scent bloomed gently, curling upward into the rafters. She walked through each room with a pad of sticky notes. She marked nothing. She just looked. This wasn't a wound anymore. It was a womb. She stopped in the master bedroom, now stripped to the bones, and looked at the space where her old hope had once lived. Where silence had once meant exile, now it meant ownership. Saturday, 10:04 a.m. Mountain View Pines Residences. The first thing Maggie noticed wasn't the view, it was the quiet. Not the forced hush of tension, but true silence, the kind that lived in well-insulated walls and well-earned peace. Her new apartment smelled faintly of pine and primer. The walls were painted a warm, unassuming gray, the kind that didn't need to beg for approval. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the foothills like art, golden brush and slate ridges just beginning to green from spring melt. She walked in slowly, fingers trailing across the new countertops. No dents, no coffee rings, no ghost of other people's arguments, just space. Her name on the lease, her name on the mailbox, her name on the future. The movers finished quickly, mostly books, framed photos, a few carefully packed canvases from a previous version of herself. Maggie tipped them in cash and waited until the door clicked closed. Before exhaling, she was home. Monday, 6:45 p.m. The knock was light and rhythmic, 3 short taps like a question rather than a demand. Maggie opened the door to find a woman in her 60s, glasses perched on her head and a bottle of Pinot in hand. "Hi, I'm Cheryl from 3C. Figured I'd come by before the building starts assigning us to fire drills like it's summer camp. I host wine and crosswords on Wednesdays. You look like a Wednesday person." Maggie blinked, then smiled. "That might be the kindest insult I've ever received." Cheryl grinned. "I bring the wine, you bring the sarcasm." "I'll consider it," Maggie said. Cheryl handed over the bottle. "No pressure, but I make a mean 7-letter word." The door closed again. Maggie looked at the label. Oregon Vintage, nothing flashy, just thoughtful. She placed it on the kitchen counter beside a brand new set of oil paints and 3 blank canvases. They'd been an impulse purchase. Joanna had nudged her gently into buying them after seeing an old photo in one of Maggie's binders. "You used to paint," she'd said. "Maybe it's time to start filling your walls with your own stories." So Maggie did. She opened the nearest box, pulled out a palette knife, and mixed her first stroke of cobalt onto canvas. Her hand was slower than it used to be, but steadier somehow. The color bled cleanly, unapologetically. It wasn't about being good anymore, it was about being. Tuesday, 8:12 a.m. The letter came in a pale blue envelope, handwritten inside a folded card with embossed leaves. No dramatic thank you, no plea for more, just a single printed message. "Your donation to Rocky Mountain Hospice will support 73 families this quarter. On their behalf, we thank you for giving grief a softer landing." Tucked inside was a small white enamel pin shaped like a dove. Maggie held it for a moment, thumb brushing its edge before pinning it quietly to the inner pocket of her coat. She didn't need anyone to see it. She just needed to feel it there. Thursday, 5:23 p.m. Maggie logged into her email and found a message from Grant. Subject line: Garden Update. Attached was a photo taken from the same angle Maggie used to snap each spring. The backyard, her old hydrangeas now joined by a stone bench, a few rows of raised planters, and a young pear tree just beginning to bud. The new owners had adopted it like a child. Grant's note was short. "They loved what you started. Just thought you'd want to see." She did. Maggie downloaded the image, set it as her background, then opened her journal, the one with no lock, no secrecy, no fear of being read. She turned to a fresh page and wrote the date at the top, then just one line: "You survived them." Friday, 11:02 a.m. Law Offices of Klein and Marmon, Denver. The air inside the law office smelled like oak and ink and discretion. Maggie sat across from a desk carved from some forest that no longer existed, her posture straight, her navy blouse unwrinkled despite the spring heat. Her reading glasses rested just below her brow, though she didn't need them. Yet she already knew what the pages said. Across from her sat Arthur Clean, late 40s, mild tan hair thinning in a way that made him look more honest. He tapped the edge of the new draft of her will with a fountain pen. "Everything's lined up as requested," he said. "Transfer of assets, property, remaining investment accounts, all directed to the Willow Finch Foundation, Safe Women Transitional Housing Network, and the Sloan Nursing Grant." He paused, turning one page over gently. "No personal heirs listed?" Maggie didn't flinch. "Not anymore." He nodded. "The removal of Ryan and Amber is irrevocable. They cannot challenge this without exposing their own prior negligence." "I counted on that," Arthur smiled. "You're sharper than half my clients 30 years younger." "I've lived around lawyers," she said, "long enough to know where the knife should go." He chuckled softly, signing in the designated witness boxes. There's one more item, something about a personal journal. Maggie reached into her tote and pulled out a leather-bound book, its spine softened by years of handling. A crimson ribbon hung from the middle like a thread of unfinished thought. She placed it carefully on the desk. This gets delivered to my niece Hannah, only her, upon my death. Not before and not a page earlier. Arthur examined it briefly but didn't open it. Instructions recorded and filed. The will was signed, dated, witnessed, notarized. Final Friday, 1:34 p.m. Joanna's office. Joanna slid the documents into a heavy steel case, double-locked and digitally cataloged. Everything stored under your estate file, she confirmed. It will release automatically to the named contacts, including the journal. Maggie nodded. Let it all out when I no longer need to explain myself. Joanna looked up. And if they show up then? Maggie smiled. Let the words do what I no longer need to. Friday, 7:11 p.m. Mountain View Pines kitchen. Maggie stood at the kitchen counter, the sun slipping behind the mountains in slow motion. She placed a single beeswax candle in a stone dish at the center of the table. Not lavender this time, just unscented, simple, no perfume, no projection, just flame. She struck the match, lit it, and watched it hold. This wasn't a memorial or a ritual, it was a closing. She sat down, pulled out her pen, and scrawled a final line in a second smaller journal, the one without names, without dates. Then she stood, blew out the flame, and whispered to the smoke, I don't owe silence anymore. Sunday, 9:16 a.m. Mountain View Pines balcony. The morning air carried no bitterness, only sage and stone and the faintest note of pine from the ridge. Maggie sat wrapped in a soft gray shawl on her small balcony, ceramic mug warming both hands. The tea was orange pekoe today, strong, steady. She didn't need sweetener. She'd lived too long to soften the truth. The sky stretched wide in front of her, big and forgiving, the kind of view you couldn't argue with. She exhaled slowly, watching steam rise in the space between lip and mug, letting the silence settle into her bones. It was the good kind of silence, not the punished kind, not the ignored kind, just silence that held its own dignity. Her balcony planter, only half filled, held marigolds and a stubborn strand of rosemary she hadn't expected to survive the transfer. She reached to pluck a dead leaf and paused. A hummingbird landed at the far edge of the planter, vibrant and still. It hovered for a moment, then rested, tiny claws gripping ceramic as if it had always belonged there. Maggie smiled, quiet and whole. Amber had hated hummingbirds. They're too fast, like bugs pretending to be pretty. Maggie had never agreed. She watched the bird now, its wings a shimmer of defiance. When it lifted off and vanished into the sky, Maggie stood and walked back inside. 10:42 a.m. living room. She sat cross-legged on the floor, a large box open in front of her. Inside, photo albums, the heavy kind with sticky pages and crinkled corners, a time capsule of lives built in uneven layers. She flipped past weddings where the bride's smile was more performance than joy, birthdays blurred by years and resentment, Thanksgiving tables set like stage props. She didn't linger. Halfway through the second album, she paused at Ryan's graduation photo, Amber in the hospital bed with their newborn before the entitlement set in. Maggie looked at them a long time, then she pulled the two photos free. She folded them in half, neatly, respectfully, and slid them into a padded envelope labeled to be discarded later. No rage, no drama, just subtraction. She turned the page. There was Bill, young, windblown, laughing at something off-camera. She smiled and tapped the page once. Still here, she said aloud, even now. 3:08 p.m. apartment interior. Her space was sparse but intentional. No shrine to pain, no altars to disappointment, just clean wood floors, soft light, and choices she made without compromise. She'd bought a small walnut bookshelf the week before, now filled only halfway, Toni Morrison, Mary Oliver, 3 new sketchbooks, a candle, and a tin marked Clarity. No clutter, no storage bins bursting with other people's messes. On her wall hung one painting, hers a cobalt skyline layered over ochre earth, imperfect but fully her own. The place didn't echo, didn't haunt, it breathed. 6:41 p.m. Kitchen table. The day wound down without incident. No calls, no guilt masquerading as concern, no footsteps overhead or thin apologies through closed doors. Maggie poured one last cup of tea and set it on the table beside a fresh pad of paper. She didn't write tonight. She didn't need to. Instead, she looked around the apartment, the table, the painting, the hummingbird planter just visible through the glass. This wasn't a rebuild, it was a rebirth, and this time no one got to vote. Final scene. Maggie's voice, interior monologue, I was the only one who ever made this house a home. She reached up, flicked off the light, the edges of her silhouette blending into twilight, and the only one strong enough to leave it. Scene holds on her reflection in the dark window, still unafraid. Fade to black.